All right, for the fourth time now?
Something like that. I'm terrible at that.
Same, apparently. Kaitlin has been gracing the blah 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 stage, I think now for the fourth time. Her first talk was in Louisville, and since then she's been at every Cincinnati event. And she is a very gifted storyteller. She has tales that are never ending. I kid you not, like I don't know what she's going to talk about tonight, but I can tell you that after last weekend, it might have changed because Kaitlin is destined to be in motorcycle story after motorcycle story because she puts herself out there. She is fearless in making adventure happen around her, and she's a huge inspiration to me as a rider. So I'm like, all right, you know what? Kaitlin can do it. I got to try it too. So her stories are just absolutely incredible. If you aren't familiar with her, get familiar with Kaitlin because she's phenomenal. She started riding motorcycles in 2019 and has been causing a lot of trouble for everyone ever since. She recently also moved to Louisville. Yay, Louisville transplant. But she loves her Cincinnati motorcycling community and can't wait to get her up here for the fourth time. Kaitlin, Gossett, get on up here.
It's a little weird to be up here in like regular shoes and not motorcycle boots. Unfortunately, I did kind of explode my knee last weekend. And I can stand now, which is really cool because last Saturday that was not happening. That's actually not even the most interesting story though. That does not rate the top 10. It was kind of just a low side, and it's like, oh, not again, all right, fine. Oh great, this time it actually is gonna be expensive, cool. But you know, it's actually still kind of on brand that I brought the car here that I brought because this story is also an odyssey. So, this started where a lot of terrible ideas start for this community, at Mid-Ohio Vintage Days, which was previously described as, quote, a redneck paradise. I can agree with that. And in fact, I think it was the combined effect of like the dust in the air and the constant sound of two-stroke pit bikes and the constant plumes of blue smoke they were leaving that our brains were scrambled enough that this idea ever got off the ground. It started out with a reasonable premise, which is that I needed a larger touring bike. Specifically, all my friends on larger displacement bikes needed me to have a larger touring bike because they were sick of checking their rearview mirrors to see if they'd lost the 300 going up the last hill on 71. So after a years-long pressure campaign, I was looking on Marketplace, and that weekend in Mid-Ohio, I was in fact messaging on Marketplace about perhaps the worst V-Strom available on the East Coast at the time. And I was telling Nate, I was like, oh man, it's perfect. It's got ABS, it's a touring bike, it runs, it has a title, and it's $1,700. Yeah.
That is not a thing you really find post-COVID, is full-size titled bikes for that kind of money. So I was very into this. Now there was one small problem. It was located in Washington, D.C., a nice solid 560 miles from here, where we were having this plan. And I was kind of floating this idea to Nate, who I'd also just started dating. A lot of bold decisions were being made that day. And I mean, just started dating. This, in fact, would be the first thing we would do together as a couple. And I really think that the fact that we are still dating, and in fact have moved in together, is remarkable in light of what I'm about to tell you about. So I'm telling you about this V-Strom, and it's Sunday, we're getting ready to go home, and I had 3 very dangerous words come into my mind. Fly and ride. I don't know if you guys have heard of a fly and ride or a fly and drive. Yes. I know some people in this room have actually done this, but the premise is simple. You get a one-way plane ticket to your desired vehicle, go get it, and then ride it back. And I'm messaging this guy to ensure this V-Strom is actually rideable at this generous price point. And he was like, oh yeah,
And then he gave me the great line that you should always be worried if you hear, yeah, I ran when I parked it. And he had videos of it running, and he's like, no, the brakes do drag a little. And I was like, you know, I think I can handle that. I was kind of maybe feeling a little too cool. I had really developed my wrenching skills over the past couple of years. A couple days ago, I'd casually reassembled Nate's entire DT50 from a box of parts. And I was like, maybe that's a thing I can do. And maybe this specific stupid series of actions could get me a really cheap bike. This was beginning to be, I was feeling almost irresponsible not to do this. So, just like that, I had overnighted on Amazon an All Balls Racing brake rebuild kit for a V-Strom. And now a series of events have been set into motion. It was real now. And I was able to set up a time in just a few days to go get it. And so Nate and I were kind of hashing out some of the details on Monday, and his initial reaction was like, that is really stupid, followed by, all right, you're doing the really stupid thing, so now I wish I was coming.
Yes.
And my thought there was, as much as I love my solo trips, if ever there was a time to bring backup, it would be to go get the sight unseen, sketchy V-Strom that has visible cobwebs on it in the photos. It was parked outside a condo and left to die. That's why I picked this for rescued as the theme. We were going to go rescue this poor machine from the swamp in which it had been left, to grow a green film over it, which was also visible in the pictures. This is a process in ecology called primary succession, where a barren landscape is colonized by the first organisms. The V-Strom was being reclaimed by the environment, by the first lichens and algae. And as beautiful as nature is, I was like, I gotta step in here because there's a really sweet deal. And it was then that Nate reminded me of something interesting, which was, oh yeah, DC. That's not too far from Richmond. And John still needs to get his Funduro 650 from here in Ohio down to Richmond. And this is what happens when all your friends are also motorcycle fiends. Your various schemes and ideas begin to converge, begin to synergize. And I was like, my God, in one insane loop event, I could deliver 2 motorcycles with a combined value of under $3,000. And I was like, wait, Nate, that Funduro doesn't run right. That's why it's still stuck in Ohio. That's why he didn't just, take it. And Nate was like, oh, it's just the carbs. Oh, it's just the dual carb on a 25-year-old BMW of unknown provenance and maintenance. And Nate's like, I bet I can fix it tonight. And I was like, that's cool, because we're leaving tomorrow, the second I get off of work. And a plan thrown together that fast. There were some details unaccounted for that would revisit us later. But at the time, we were really starting to feel like we had a cool idea here. So we met up at my house Tuesday after work. It's 5 p.m. and our plan now is to ride straight through the night to Richmond, Virginia, about 9 hours, about 580 miles. Easy. And so we saddle up. He's on his Tenere 700. I'm on the Funduro, which he did in fact fix perfectly overnight. Holy shit. I think it's worth noting that for a lot of folks, that would be like the whole story. Like overnight fixing an old BMW to ride it over 500 miles across the country with no support vehicle or backup, except for your girlfriend who's just fighting for her life. So we did that. And actually, I thought that was going to be the hard part. I thought riding a single-cylinder 650 on the highway for 9 hours was going to be the hard part. It was the easy part. And I love making fun of BMW as much as anybody else, but I kind of have to hand it to him. That bike was a dreamboat. That thing, I was cruising. I was like, Nate, do you think John will just let me keep this? We can, this is 650 cc's. I can just take this and be done right now. No such luck. We deliver the bike. We get into Virginia about 4:30. Hell yeah. John had woken himself up to take delivery of his bike at 4:30 a.m. I think his exact words were, "I can't believe you actually just did that." We sleep in his living room. It was very nice. His dog, curled up next to us, and I was like, all right, this is actually turning out to be kind of a chill, fun, spontaneous midweek adventure that definitely won't have any complications tomorrow. Complications like the fact that since we left mid-Ohio, Nate had been saying that his throat felt kind of scratchy, which at the time I was like, it's just the dust. That place was a localized environmental disaster. I'm sure the air quality meters were tripping for hundreds of miles in all directions. Of course your throat is scratchy. It's definitely only that. Anyways, Wednesday morning is when reality began to hit. So we had come into Virginia in the middle of the night, which is the ideal time to travel in Virginia in the summer. We step outside, it is 9 a.m. and it is 96 degrees somehow, and humid. Everything is like moist and slimy to the touch. And I was like, it's morning, man. The sun's not up. Where did all this heat come from? But this was swamp heat, which is not Midwestern heat at all. It is far worse. And so now we are reconfiguring all our combined tools and possessions onto the one bike, the Tenere, which we had not equipped at all to ride two up with all our stuff for this trip. And what we wound up with was some kind of configuration where I'm basically holding myself up with my arms on the back of the bike because there is nowhere for me to sit. If I sit, I just squish the guy I am now dating mercilessly into a gas tank. So it's kind of an instant death scenario for all involved. We can't do it the good way, so we're gonna do it the bad way. Thankfully, it's only 93 miles. At the time, we lived 800 miles apart. 90 miles is kind of an afterthought, kind of a footnote, we don't care. And I was like, we were both pouring sweat first thing in the morning, just getting the bike set up, but I was like, we'll get on the highway. It's highway the whole way there. Well, the air will cool us. You know, that brisk breeze you get in the famously fast and efficient DC highway traffic on a weekday morning. So Nate, who is riding the tallest, top-heaviest bike you can get, with an additional person balanced all the way on top of the tail of it, now has to do feathering the clutch and stop-and-go traffic for 93 miles. And thankfully, the Tenere had a temperature gauge to let us know that the air on the highway was 106 degrees. We had to stop multiple times because vital body parts were starting to shut down from the heat. I was in a perpetual state of thinking I might lose consciousness or throw up or both at the same time. We made it into DC. We struggled to find the meeting point for this guy. I was beginning to think I was losing touch with reality. I was like, we were just here. I just saw the street. What's happening? Where are we? Finally, we roll up, and I'm like, that looks like a shitty V-Strom in a parking lot. We've arrived! The hard part is over now. So we meet the guy. We are in rough shape. The scratchy throat situation is progressing rapidly. And so Nate kind of sinks down to sit next to the Tenere while I go sign the papers. Maybe if we were not both on the verge of collapse from heat stroke, we would have really shaken the bike down, maybe lowballed the guy a little bit, maybe thought for 15 seconds about what we were doing. As it was, I was like, yeah, here's my money, give me the thing, all right, cool, we're done, goodbye. Jesus Christ. And so, he skedaddled out of there the second the ink was dry on that check. The seller was gone. And I would quickly begin to find out why he'd been in such a hurry to flee the premises. We go back to the bike. Nate has discovered that you cannot just sit and peacefully rest anywhere in DC because the mosquitoes will start to carry you away. When they call that place a swamp, it's not just because it's full of disgusting, slimy creatures. It is also the natural environment that existed before us. People shouldn't live there, man. We should have just left that alone. That's not for us. And so here we are in this parking lot that is somehow at full humidity at 102 degrees. And we're like, all right, well, here's the V-Strom. It indeed looks terrible. It's slimy to the touch. That's new. Okay. All right, it starts, it idles, the lights work mostly. All right, cool. All right, let's just see how stuck the brakes are. So I give it a little push. And I push it again. And Nate's like, are you sure it's not in gear? I'm like, no, it's in neutral. And ladies and gentlemen, the brakes are seized to the rotors. It is all fused into one very fucked up unit. And I was like, all right, cool. Well, I'm sure with our combined powers, this will be a simply resolved solution, and we will be out of here sometime in the evening, and this will not turn into a multi-day nightmare. So we start first with normal methods of trying to remove calipers and quickly progressing to extreme violence. At one point we had unbolted the calipers so that we could roll the bike forward and like ram them up against the back of the fork legs to knock them off. So we are using the full weight of the V-Strom and both of us launching it forward to try and bash the calipers off. And somehow eventually they parted from the rotors and left like caliper-shaped marks on the rotors. And I was like, that's a lot to unpack here. And at that moment, we were starting to actually feel a little better because the sky, which had been, burning us with the hatred of the sun, had gotten nice and dark. And then I was like, that's really dark for like 3 p.m. And I looked at AccuWeather and I'm like, oh, Nate, don't worry. It looks like it's just north of us. It's a big system, but it's just going to miss us. And pretty much the second I said that, the sky opened and more rain rained on us than has ever rained on me in my life. And I went from like startled to incredulous to just bewildered. And again, we have nowhere to go. We are in a parking lot with a T7. That is the entire setup here. So now it just looks like 2 homeless people are trying to steal a V-Strom in the rain. We had to like abandon operations temporarily because like we couldn't see what we were doing, and also our tools were starting to get swept by the flash flood. So we had to like pile everything against a curb and then just hide under this one tiny umbrella, which sounds cute and romantic, but the air was still somehow 102 degrees despite the rain. So this is just a new kind of diabolical situation. And we're just holding on, like, fighting for our respective lives. And Nate's like, I think I have COVID. I was like, one crisis at a time. Also, pro tip, if you are dating someone who grew up on a farm and they say they feel under the weather, they're on the verge of death. They should go to a hospital. I was not quite figuring that out yet, but that was very much the situation. So we get rained on for an hour and a half because there is no alternative to that happening anywhere that exists. And we resume our work. We are able to get enough of the calipers off to realize, oh yeah, these are not brake pads anymore. Whatever this material is, this non-Newtonian substance that has taken the place of what were once brake pads, this will not stop a motorcycle. I'm scared of what this might do. We need new brake pads. The cycle gear closes in 45 minutes on the other side of the city. Saddle up the Tenere. We are quickly losing hope of leaving the city. We get to cycle gear 5 minutes before they close, stumble in, still drenched in water and smelling amazing, I am sure. And we're like, brake pads, please. Also, do you have any socks? We're so wet. We take all the dry socks and V-Strom brake pads that they have, and they're like, you guys, we briefly explain our situation, and they're just like, Jesus Christ. Where'd you say you were from? Ohio, and you're here. And this bike needs to go, oh, I see. Huh. Well, we're closing now. Good luck. So we are now sitting on the curb, like in the shopping plaza where the cycle gear is, like looking for hotels, because it is now dark and there's like water spreading out from around where we are sitting. I was like, yeah, I am revising the plan in real time. The plan is now evolving to include tomorrow, unfortunately. And how much COVID do you think? All of it. All of the COVID. You're having trouble talking and breathing. Cool. I am not worried or stressed at all right now. I'm thinking, if it comes down to it, can I just leave our stuff here and take Nate home on the back of the Tenere? That might happen. That is now entering my mind as a real possibility for this evening. We get to the hotel, and for like a few hours, I feel like a normal person again. And then we're asleep, and then now it is Thursday, and I am still in DC. And there is a V-Strom across town that is legally my problem and has my name on it. And that is the thing I chose to do of my own free will. I was seriously considering alternatives. There was like a ditch down the hill. There were like some woods next to the condo, and I was like, if we roll it down there and cover it with branches, it'll probably still be there when we come back in a week. I'm just saying. So we get back, and we are now armed with more tools than before. We made some shopping stops. And now we have a cute, tiny little blowtorch and some PB blaster. And whenever those two things are being used at the same time, that means you're having a bad day. And we're just going in starting right there with that. Because now the calipers, which are fused into like hateful little units, must come apart so the pads can be replaced and we can put the new seals in and turn this back into a motorcycle that can be ridden 560 miles out of here. And they're totally seized together. So Nate begins the PB blaster blowtorch protocol, which is to prop the caliper up in the path of the blowtorch, heat it for extended periods of time, blast it with more PB blaster, and see if it's considering loosening up now. The blowtorching will continue until morale improves. The V-Strom, for his part, had exactly enough battery life left to start twice for us, and then that battery died. So while Nate is attending to the calipers, which are slowly coming apart, I'm like, I cannot believe we've made any progress at all. This is insane. You're insane. And you're also half dead. I'm very worried about this. But both of us are still needed somehow. Or both of us are going to die here. In this swamp. This evil swamp. Also, we kept waiting for someone to call the cops because we were in like the swanky part of DC. We asked the dude, we're like, hey man, how much are those condos anyway? He's like, oh yeah, it's a $650,000 plus a $1,200 a month fee. And I was like, oh, you pay more in fees than I do in rent. This city is terrible. This place is a nightmare. I must leave immediately. Somehow no one's called the cops about the homeless people next to the broken V-Strom yet. I take off for the auto parts store on the Tenere to get a new battery. And while I'm there, my phone rings. It's Nate calling me, and I'm like, I'm 10 minutes from him. There's no good news that he's calling me about right now. There's no good news that couldn't wait 10 minutes. So I answer, and he's like, so, Amazon sent us the wrong rebuild kit for the brakes. Oh, cool. That's, I'm like trying not to like just burst into tears on the phone because that's really not going to help the situation. Also, I'm very dehydrated. I need to conserve that water desperately. So I was like, is that it? Is that the ball game? I just bought this battery. It costs so much. Fuck. And we discussed this, and he's like, well, maybe. You know, it's really just the outer seals that are all screwed up and bad. The inner seals kind of still work. And I was like, you're telling me that there's salvageable parts inside of the worst brake calipers I've ever seen in my life, and they might last at least another 500 miles per se? He's like, I don't know. Maybe. I will take maybe. Because any alternative to maybe opens the door to new nightmares not previously considered possible. So the caliper reassembly begins. And then we have to flush the chunky black goo out of the brake lines. Yeah, no, I was like, I don't know what kind of substance that is or where it came from. I'm a little scared to touch it, frankly. I know that you're not supposed to get this stuff on the paint, but I don't want that on me. We get that mostly flushed, and there is, of course, air just trapped everywhere in there. I was so sure I wanted ABS units. And now they're full of air, and they cannot be cycled manually, and that is just the situation that we have, and this is about as good as it is going to get. We managed to get the bike kind of buttoned back together. I take it around the swanky neighborhood and terrorize people doing my emergency stop tests. And you know what? I have about 50 to 60% brake function, which means the bike will stop, which means as far as I'm concerned, it is roadworthy. Yes. Yeah. I'm like, I can just increase my stopping distances. I've ridden bikes with drum brakes before. It's fine. This is fine. And Nate had the heart to offer, is like, I can ride that one if you want, and you can ride the Tenere. And I was like, no, on principle. Also, you've suffered enough. My God. Why have you not just left me here? Like, the Tenere works. You could just leave, man. What happened to Kaitlin? Oh, I don't know. She had some business in D.C. She'll come back, maybe. was an option, and frankly, I wouldn't have even been mad. This was beyond what you can ask for someone that you started dating, I repeat, 4 days ago. So we do our little test lap with the bike. It seems to mostly be working. One fork is leaking, and that is easily solved by tying a microfiber around the leaking seal to absorb the fluid before it touches the rotors. Excellent mechanical work at play here. So the bike is almost rideable. Nate's like, cool, glad it somewhat stops. Your headlight's out. I was like, okay, so new bulbs. And he's like, well, both of them have gone out at once. This may mean something else is afoot. It is 5 p.m. on Thursday. I'm supposed to work on Friday. The physics of this are stretching to become impossible just in terms of time and distance. So he takes the relay apart. We scratch the corrosion off the little terminals. It would turn out this is an aftermarket fix for the stock wiring by a company called Eastern Beaver, which, first of all, that sounds like a euphemism. And second of all, my God, I'm like, this was the upgrade? This is the improvement? Oh, let's take the cheapest relay possible and stick it right where all the salt spray comes up off the wheel as the bike is ridden. That will definitely not lead to any problems further down the road. Anyway, so the problems further down the road proceeded to follow us as we tried to leave the godforsaken city. We got it working once, it immediately stopped again, it's now getting dark, and I mean, the bad brakes I can live with, but I do draw the line, safety-wise, at no front lights on the motorcycle at all. You know, the brakes, I don't know, you can just take longer to stop, but if you can't see, you won't even have time to brake at all. So, the second time we stop, it is no longer funny. It is now 8 p.m. We have just made it into Maryland, and no lights. So we just stop in some random parking lot. We're not talking, we are just dealing with this. I'm just keeping my gear on, staying on the bike, like manifesting that will somehow make this go faster. And Nate has tried negotiating with the relay, and we are now turning to violence. So he just rips the cables out of it, gets some electrical tape, and hot wires the headlight on. The headlight is now on. The headlight will not turn off again under any circumstances until this bike is either parked in my garage or otherwise destroyed. The headlight will be on, one way or the other. We were in a dispensary parking lot, and I think it really speaks a lot to the feelings we were feeling at the moment, that neither of us even thought to investigate that interesting opportunity or gather souvenirs. No, we didn't even look at it. It was just like, this fucking relay. But now the V-Strom somehow is rolling down the road and is doing pretty great. And I'm like, this thing kind of rips. This is kind of nice, this big V-twin. Was this a good idea after all? Does this bike kind of rock? And so I'm thinking, even though we are both exhausted, that we might be through the worst of it. I was like, okay, that was the hard part. First I thought that other thing was the hard part. Before I thought that was the hard part. This was actually the hard part. Now it's the easy part. And I continued to think that until we were just about to enter Wheeling, Ohio and begin the final leg. And we were stopped for gas, and Nate's mom texted us because she knew about the shenanigans. I was like, my parents will know about this after the fact. They do not need real-time updates. They get to hear about my adventures in the past tense, never as they are unfolding. I can't spin the story if they're getting the real-time details. So she messaged, she's like, hey, have you guys checked the weather? And I was like, should we, Nate? Should we check the weather? I open AccuWeather again, not enjoying my track record for doing that, and there is a storm system the size of Ohio in Ohio. It goes from Columbus to Wheeling. It is directly in front of us and will continue to be in front of us for the next 130 miles. And I was like, cool, great. Well, I did complain earlier about being miserable and overheated, and I am now cured of that. I will be aggressively cured of being too warm. And you know what? It's just rain. The hard part's already over. So we ride directly into the giant thunderstorm about midnight. And I had a rain suit on, and the seam on my shoulder failed about 15 minutes into the hour-and-a-half storm experience. And at first, I just had to laugh, because, of course, naturally, what else would this rain suit do but immediately betray me today? And I stopped laughing pretty quickly because first just my shoulder is wet, and then thanks to the miracle of, capillary action, my whole body is wet. Also, first time riding this bike with this helmet, which is a, dirt bike helmet with some modifications essentially, MX-9, with no chin shroud, which is interesting now that we're in the rain, and there's a really cool thing happening with the aerodynamics of the V-Strom where rain is being sucked up directly into my helmet. So I am now being waterboarded at 75 miles per hour just past 12:30 on the highway headed towards Columbus. Oh my God. And at least, and Nate's like, my phone's not waterproof anymore. Your phone that's on the bike in the storm? Yeah. Oh, yep, it shut off. So Nate now has no phone, but at least we still have each other. And then my microphone got too waterlogged for him to hear me over the Senna anymore. And I'm like, my one true joy in life, yapping constantly, has been taken from me. I don't know if I can survive this. I have never had mile markers pass so slowly in my life. I am levels of cold and waterlogged I have not yet experienced. I have to say the ride from Virginia to DC, that still takes the top spot for worst motorcycle experience of my life, but this was trying really hard to get that close second. I did not know how this would end. I was like, I know that theoretically I am pointed towards home, but it just seems like the distance keeps, having the paradox of halves. I'm always halfway there. I don't know if there actually is an end to this. Maybe I died a long time ago and this is the bad place. And I just do this forever for my sins on earth. By the time we get to Columbus and the rain is finally relenting a bit, we were hoping for some delicious late night gas station hot dogs. But we're in that godforsaken part of 71 now where everything closes. There's no gas stations that are open. There's no roller dogs, you fools. You have one Cliff Bar, share it. So we're stopped at this gas station and I'm doing this. And Nate's mom had been like, can you guys just get a hotel? This is a nightmare. And I was like, the idea of prolonging this experience another day is not something I'm willing to consider. I would rather die than have this go on a full other day. In fact, I may die, but I've accepted that. At this point, a little bit of a mercy, and I very much had it coming, so, We get back on the highway, and it is almost an out-of-body experience to have this nightmare swamp monster bike, pointed towards my house. How has this thing made it this far into Ohio? How is any of this happening? I'm beginning to feel kind of weird and loopy, and it might be the not sleeping, but it also might be that whatever COVID Nate had, well, my check has been in the mail, and it's about to arrive. And so it's now about 3 in the morning, and man, the semis that are out at 3 in the morning, they are aggressive. They know that there's no cops for miles, and they do whatever they want, and what they want to do is cut you off at 90 miles per hour in the left lane. And I was just like, not even the top 5 worst things that have happened today is nearly getting smoked by this semi right now. Nate, oh God, Nate, do not retaliate. No, please. He will take you out. He's ready to kill someone. Finally, we're getting back into Cincinnati, and I cannot believe that I am still alive, that this bike has somehow just happily trundled on the whole time. For all the neglect and abuse this thing has suffered, and we would find so many more messed up little Easter eggs on this bike as we fixed it, for all the terrible things it had been through, it just scooted right along, which KTMs will not do new out of the factory. This bike had rusted into place, into immobility, and we kind of just fixed the brakes and rode it 560 miles. Give or take some. And as we started pulling onto my street, I was like, I don't quite know that this is really happening, but I'm just going to try and see it through to the end here just in case. When we parked in my garage, I looked at Nate and I was like, you're free to break up with me now. I am so sorry. And he's like, I don't want to have a conversation about this. I want to be in bed now. So we disembark the hogs. Leave him in the garage. I'm looking at this V-Strom in my garage did I just do that? all it cost was $1,700 and all of my sanity, physical health, and chances of survival. What a deal! I'm pretty smart! And this is the problem. Every time I get away with one of these things, that's the lesson I take away is, it was terrible, but it worked. I still had hopes of making it to work on Friday. It was important to me that if I completed this little mission, that it not interfere too much with being a responsible adult. I give you one guess. Did the person crawling with COVID who just rode all night on this V-Strom after fixing it for 2 days make it to work by 8 in the morning?
Yes.
Absolutely not. I woke up when my alarm went off feeling like I had been run over by that semi-truck. I heard it go off and I was like, look, there's a lot I can do and I physically cannot stand up and go walk into that lab right now. It will not happen. It cannot come to pass. Later that day, we would both take COVID tests, which turned red faster than I've ever seen a COVID test turn before. I think we were both about 50% COVID by weight at that point. And definitely worse for the wear. Multiple times, about this close to some kind of unfortunate death, but we didn't. And now there's a V-Strom in my garage. And somehow, we are still dating. Thank you.